You're tuned in to HorrorSlop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets, so grab a flashlight, and maybe a therapist.
This is HorrorSlop. And now the first descent. One story to open the night. Just enough to crack the door and let something in.
Every elementary school has a ridiculous urban legend. My school had Muppet Man, and I hated him. Muppet Man was deformed. Ill-fated plastic surgery left him with the ghastly proportions of a marionette puppet, so he stole a rainbow animal costume from the school theater and wore it everywhere. He lived in an ancient oak tree in the recess yard. Some kids claimed he lived in the branches, watching us play from camouflaged hideouts of leaves and twigs. He told me I couldn't repeat it to anybody. I never did. It was too horrifying to even think about, let alone share. That was another problem. The kids at school knew Jason was my neighbor, and they knew my dad was a cop. After weeks of hysterical interest, I was abruptly ostracized. It suited me fine. Over the past couple years, my dad had arrested the parents of at least 2 kids in my class, and they gave me hell for it. It was all right. I preferred books to people anyway and spent every recess reading under the oak tree. Sometimes I pretended to read to Jason's ghost. Penance, I guess, for treating him so poorly. One day in February I got to school 2 or 3 hours late. I don't remember why. I only remember getting to school and plodding across the empty recess yard. I swallowed a surge of panic and took extra care with each step, setting my foot down with excruciating gentleness. Sand crunched under my soles. Everything felt solid, but the sense of glassy fragility persisted. I fought the urge to close my eyes and walked as quickly as I dared. I slowed to a halt, staring at it with the kind of hushed reverence you're supposed to feel in church. The tree was scary but beautiful at the same time. More than that, it was a pillar of my memory. It was visible from my backyard, towering over the school and my childhood like a reassuring and eternal sentry. Except it wasn't eternal. It would be gone someday, maybe before I left grade school. Maybe sooner. Except, another brutal, bleak epiphany, there was no wind. The dark mistletoe rustled and writhed like a trapped serpent. And glittering in that sinuous rope of color, eyes. "Hello," it said. Its voice made me jump, full and hearty and unpleasantly friendly. A cartoon voice. My lip trembled. Tears pricked my eyes, scorching and frigid at once. "You're not real." "Yes, I am." It fixed me with a sharp, reptilian stare that made me want to scream. "I might even be realer than you." But the pavement remained solid. The frozen chill bypassed the soles of my shoes and leached into my feet. The poor nurse tried to extract the story from me. I don't even remember what I said. I just remember hiding under her desk and sobbing. When I finally blubbered the words Muppet Man and Jason, the school went on lockdown. The cops came. My father wasn't with them. I watched through the window, gagging and crying and trying to forget Muppet Man's bright green eyes. But how could I, when everything else, the oak tree and the police, the nurse and the sky and my own shaking hands, looked so brittle and faded? Muppet Man was the only vibrant thing. The only bright thing. The only whole thing. "Did you do that?" the cop demanded. "Do what?" I screamed. "Do what?" "Did you put that, he pointed to a particularly obscene knot of neon pink fur, on this tree. The nurse sent me home shortly thereafter, and my parents packed me off to my grandparents' house in San Diego that very night. I stayed for 3 weeks. Stayed until I stopped having nightmares of Muppet Man eating Jason's bloody, shit-stained clothes while I watched, trapped by his bright eyes like a deer in headlights. My parents fed me Burger King and ice cream cake, then sent me to bed. When I pulled my covers back, I froze. Everything around me blanched, turning pale and glassy. My parents assumed I did it and yelled at me for almost an hour, but they let me sleep in their bed anyway. School was a nightmare. I spent the entire morning dreading recess. When the bell rang, I thought about throwing a tantrum just to stay in the classroom. But I'd get in trouble. My parents would be angry. I'd go to the principal's office. I told myself these things, but still ran to the bathroom when the bell rang. I threw up, then sat in the stall until a teacher, summoned no doubt by a tattletale, came and told me I had to go outside. I was cautious at first, but determined. Every adult in my life had me convinced that I was hallucinating. Every kid in the school knew I'd had a breakdown about Muppet Man. The taunts alone were enough to steel my resolve. Before I knew it, I was reading under the tree like always, the glassy winter horror barely more than memory. One afternoon in April, something pulled me out of my book. I didn't know what it was at first. Maybe the kids screaming on the jungle gym. Maybe the 5th grade girls gossiping a few yards away. Maybe the warm breeze rustling the leaves. I looked down and gasped. When I got home that afternoon, I found clusters of neon fur all over my bedroom. I ran to my mother. She lost her temper, marched me into the backyard, and told me to stay until she was done cleaning up after me. "It's great," I wheezed. I wanted to leap to my feet, wanted to run screaming into the house, but my bones felt watery and frozen at once. I wouldn't be able to stand up, let alone run. Muppet Man brushed the worms off my arm and settled down beside me. His fur made me feel itchy. I didn't look up. I already knew what I would see, that slothy dinosaur face dominated by glassy eyes that would blaze in the dying sun. I didn't want to see it. I was afraid of what would happen if I did. Strong, fuzzy fingers wrapped my wrist. "I want you to read to me. If you read to me, I'll take you to Jason Hughes." "Why?" I asked. "Because we're lonely," Muppet Man said. "When would I see Jason?" "It depends," said Muppet Man, "on how well you read." I opened my book to the very first page and began to read aloud. The scrape of the sliding glass door broke my concentration shortly after. I looked up and saw my mom. My heart leapt to my throat. I spun around hopefully, but Muppet Man was gone. So I went to my father. I showed him the note and begged until I wept. He accused me of making it all up for a while, but in the end he agreed to take me to the school at the appointed time. We lived only a few blocks away, so we walked. The evening was unseasonably cold, almost as cold as the day I first met Muppet Man. I fought back tears the entire way, clutching my father's hand with both of my own. The school gates were locked, of course, but there was a small gate hidden in a passage behind the cafeteria. It had nothing but a simple latch. The kids all knew about it, but the adults never did anything. I led my father around the perimeter of the playground, keeping close to the buildings in order to hide in the shadows. "Wait here," I whispered. He obliged, looking tired even in the darkness. I looked at the tree. It didn't look sick anymore. Leaves hid the mistletoe infestation. It looked full and healthy, the eternal sentry once more. Something rustled among the leaves overhead. "Hello," came Muppet Man's warm, full voice. The branches rattled and a dark, furry shape slithered down the tree. Glassy eyes caught the light of the moon and blazed. "He's inside me." Muppet Man crept closer, holding me captive with his glass eyes. His long, thin fingers touched his chin and pushed, sliding into his face and pulling it up like a child removing a Halloween mask. The absurd costume fell to the ground with a whisper. Dull and faded. Even the eyes were dead now. The costume was dead. It had never been alive. The ruined costume went into an evidence locker. Jason himself was laid to rest several weeks later. They held on to the body as long as they did in order to find out what happened to him. I asked my father about it, but he refused to tell me. He has a habit of telling me things I shouldn't know. Things nobody should know. I guess it's a personal exorcism, freeing demons that haunt you. It's just that the problem with freeing demons is that demons usually go on to haunt someone else. My dad retired a few years ago, but he still has friends on the force. They get together and talk every once in a while. They had one of their visits last night, and one of his friends brought up Jason Hughes. "No," said his friend. "But the costume. That weird puppet costume. It's not in evidence anymore. It's gone." Did someone take it? Did they accidentally toss it? We don't know.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
A Growing Need to Die, by Colorblindness. I fell in love with Margot the first time I tried to kill her. Did it work? Margot asked me. Clearly, her response told me that it did not. I opened my eyes and found the bullet had flattened against her skull. She was immortal. But for that amount of money, it was too easy to say yes. Especially whenever Margot made certain that my identity would be protected. She provided me documents and money before even meeting me, all of which was legal tender. I had the opportunity to leave, but this entire matter intrigued me to no end. She had money apparently from the long life she had endured. And she wired it to an account I had set up in the Caymans. Even after that first attempt she insisted I should take it and run. She didn't expect me to stick around and figure out her problems. Margot fascinated me though. The moment that bullet fell to the floor I found myself asking 100 questions. How long had she been like this? Her whole life. How long was that? Margot claimed she had stopped counting after year 703. Why did she want to die? We started small. I bought a few firecrackers and had her try to set them off directly in her face. She wasn't even mildly burnt. Car accident. Nothing. Jumping from a building. Nothing. Stabbing her in the face, the eyes, again it all seemed pointless. At one point I got her to drink poison and she acted a little sick. But then the next day she admitted she was faking. After that, we developed a closer bond as we started looking into more extreme methods. I managed to have her see one of my friends that works as an open-heart surgeon in a shady clinic for abortions. I recommended trying to put her in a coma and then taking out vital organs. The propofol did the trick to knock her out. But any instrument to cut her only bended and broke. I suggested placing an explosion in a tube down her throat. The surgeons got to work on preparing the device and then sliding it straight down her esophagus and into her stomach. I lit the fuse and waited. Her body jumped and rumbled a bit. But nothing more. Margot was a goddess. Every extreme we tried only resulted in more failures. Finally she admitted that she decided to accept her fate. If I have to keep on living, then so be it. At least I will be happy knowing that I have tried all possibilities, she said as we got back home. I've wasted more of your time than ever necessary, she added as she passed me a briefcase with well over $2 million in it. This is everything I have. I want you to take it. You've been so kind. So patient, she told me. I tossed it aside and made love to her that night. In the morning I told her I wasn't planning on leaving her. That in the months we had spent together I grew to love her more than life itself. More than death could ever separate us. Sometimes when I came home I found dozens of pill bottles scattered across the floor. Other times she had ruined knives and caused house fires, desperate to end her life. She wasn't happy. I could see that now. She knew that no matter what one day we would be gone and she would still remain. I promised her I would never tell our son and said my goodbyes. Then watched as she plummeted to the ground below. Once she was out of my line of vision I told the pilot to touch down and I ran to where she had hit the pavement. You don't know how many times I have heard that before, she moaned angrily. That was when I knew there was nothing I could say that would stop her from trying. One time she came close to drowning him in the tub while trying to end herself. Another time it was a knife and he almost cut his finger off. I reached out to my colleagues from the old days, when I was the one that was seeking to exploit suicidal cash cows. I told them everything and asked for advice. Some took it as a joke. By all accounts she should have been dead. Margot felt everything though. It's hopeless, this is punishment, I just know it, she screamed. I comforted her as our son watched on in wide-eyed confusion. I told her that we would think of something. Why does Mom not want us? Why can't she just be happy, he asked. Absolutely nothing seemed to work though. This had gone on too long. I knew that if it continued her curse would destroy our lives altogether. So I consulted the dark web again and looked into the mystic arts, spells and tomes that no man dared read. I found one that I felt would fit the bill and bought it during a Christmas sale. We placed the goat's blood around our bed in a circle like the ritual implied. Then chanted the phrase 6 times. We walked around the bed counterclockwise. Then I took her hand and we both fell asleep. When I woke up the next day, I was staring at my wife and she at me. But our souls had transferred to each other's bodies. She was mortal and I was immune. The spell had worked. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a gun, meekly passing it to me. As the life drained from my body I caressed her forehead and watched her breathe her last. She said 2 words. That was so long ago, when I watched my only body fall into a grave. When I explained to my son that now the curse was upon me. He will be on his deathbed, and I will only watch in horror as he slips away. Margot was right about this curse, and it's one I carry now. One that holds a further curse upon me. For the spell said one thing that I never told Margot. That I could never go back to the way it had been or transfer again. And maybe along the way, I can learn to live.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
I chose the blue pill, by Creeps McPasta. And number X200B. And number X200B. With this in mind, I took to the internet and blazed through until I started hitting the back pages of the search engine, looking for a hidden gem. My eyes were glazed over skimming all the titles until one shook me from my catatonic state. And number X200B. In my mind I immediately answered yes to all 3. Those questions perfectly hit the nail on the head describing how I felt. And number X200B. Before long I was given a number to call to arrange a home visit. In the call I told them of all of my problems, and how I felt. Adding the caveat that I felt too different for any ordinary service to help. They seemed to be interested in my case and gave me a date for a visit a week on Friday. And number X200B. The time couldn't come any faster. I found myself practically counting the time away for that home visit. This was it, I thought to myself, this was what was going to be the beginning to the rest of my life. And number X200B. And number X200B. This was all perfect, and everything I needed, until the last point. He started to go on about one last decision I had to make. This is when he pulled out his briefcase, something which he hadn't drawn attention to at any point prior. He opened it on my just about cleared coffee table, and turned it around. In the case were 2 pills, each on a soft bed. They almost glowed in the light with their glossy opaque coat. I stared at them. One was the most intense warm red I'd seen in person before, the other was a cool, chilling blue. Your life is a series of decisions which has lead you to this one key moment. Will you take the blue pill, see your life carry on as it is? Or, will you take the red pill, and grasp the opportunity to end that cycle? And number X200B. And number X200B. My mind first came to the thought of the red pill. I mean, it sounds like the correct decision, right? This whole session was about making decisions to forward my life, and to stop choosing to be stagnant. But then reality kicked in. If there's something I've learned from failed diets and life-changing schemes, it's that there is no fast fix in life. If you want to lose weight, you have to work hard with diet and exercise. If you want to get rich, you can't just magic opportunities, you have to be proactive, and I figured that this was the moral of the session. Are you sure? I've sat here telling you that to take control of your life, you have to make proactive decisions, he said, trying to sound persuasive. No, I'll take the blue pill. I know I have to make good decisions from now on, which I will do. But I also know that there are no magic fixes in life. Right now I'm making the first big decision of my new life. I'm choosing to take the hard way so I can grow. At first he scowled a bit, but then he smirked, and left me one last remark. And number X200B. Okay, you have made your decision dash. And number X200B. However, I will leave you the red pill. If you ever feel like you need an escape, this is always an option. And with that, he left. And number X200B. And number X200B. I started by identifying issues in my life. I had all the common things you can think of. I was terrible in social situations, especially around women. I put in about 40% effort at work, at most. I lived a messy life, and ate terribly. I would stay up all night, and be slowed down for the entire day after as consequence. After researching some helpful tips online, I found an interesting Japanese philosophy called Kaizen. It's the principle of changing so little in your life that you barely notice it. This helped a lot, as what always sent me back was my psyche getting too shocked from sudden change in status quo, and reverting back to my toxic default. I started very small. I swapped out a few unhealthy eating habits for a few good ones. I did the dishes whenever I used them, and I started simply taking notes at work. And number X200B. I was now making friends. I was now being approached for conversation, rather than being forced to for work. I was even getting a bit of attention from curious ladies. And number X200B. This is not to say I never almost caved in. Failed dates. Poor performance at work. Mess piling up in my home. All of these would start to pull me back to my low. And each time, I'd either red pill, curiosity growing of what it did, temptation clawing at me for its promise of an easy fix. However, I'd use these feelings to remind myself of its message. The message of the thankless stranger who blessed me with this motivation all those years ago. I dug out my old phone, and tried calling the number I was given all those years ago. However, the number was seemingly not in use anymore. I had all but given up. The last thing to try was to start searching Google to find if it rebranded itself elsewhere, or see if I could find traces of it in the back pages somewhere. The latter seemingly an ironic way to find it, if that worked. But this would never be the case. And number X200B. As I searched, the first few links were to major headlines on news sites. My heart sank as I clicked one of them. The article went into detail about the group that ran the service. How they were fanatics dedicated to mass murder. And how they had persuaded many people in similar situations as me to commit suicide. At first I thought it might have been a different group under the same name. An easy alibi, as things like that have happened before. I made every excuse under the sun to deny their involvement, until I saw how they did it. And number X200B. First, they would find people who were in a low point of their life. Then they would offer them a choice. A blue pill, which was a simple placebo. Or a red pill, which was filled with a lethal dose of cyanide. Which, if ingested, would result in a person's death within minutes. And number X200B. This was contradictory, as I am living proof that there was a survivor. Not that they could ever find out, since they never kept a strong paper trail. And number X200B. And number X200B. My prized possession. Now a symbol of death. But that's when I had my epiphany. The red pill had always represented the easy way out. An option that was always there, yet one that never truly fixed any problems. It was as it always represented suicide. A message which they believed was the perfect solution. However, to me it's a misguided message. Suicide is always an option, however it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And number X200B. In the end, I made the decision to stop thinking about whether they really were some sick, twisted help group with a good message, or a bunch of savages. Because to me, in a way, it didn't matter. What they did for me was the best thing that ever happened, and the message, though now more morbid, had never really changed. And number X200B. To make sure it couldn't hurt anyone, I took the red pill out of its easily opened box, and put it in a sealed, clear frame, and hung it on the wall. I still tell the story of what it means, however I always leave out the last part of its true origin.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite serves. Hope you're hungry.
If you find an unopened present under your tree on the day after Christmas, call the police, by S. Women. I'm going to make this as short and as clear as possible. If you find any Christmas presents under your tree after Christmas Day that you didn't place there, call the police. Leave the house immediately, and whatever you do, do not open the gift. I lived with my wife Maria and my 2 young boys in Melbourne, Australia. That's where my wife is originally from, and most of her family lives less than an hour from us. On Christmas Day, we usually have a lot of presents under the tree. Gifts from me and my wife, gifts from grandparents, gifts from the boys, all are placed there. That's why last Christmas, we weren't worried when I found a present under the tree that neither me or my wife had put there. It could have been from one of our parents when they came to visit on Christmas Eve. It could have been from one of the boys. It could have been from many people, and we didn't give it a second thought. It had no gift tag on it, so we decided to leave it there and not open it until we found out who it for and who sent it. So when I got up on the 26th early to make coffee, that was the only present left under the tree. It was a small box, maybe 6 inches tall and 6 inches wide, wrapped in bright red wrapping paper. There was a little green bow on top, and it all looked expertly wrapped. But when I came out into the living room that morning, there was something off about that present that I couldn't place. It wasn't until later that I realized the wrapping paper had been completely green on Christmas Day, and it wasn't until later that I noticed that red had leaked on the floor around the present as well. Now I'm usually a pretty heavy sleeper, but something woke me up that night. I'm not sure if it was a noise I heard or if I just had too much coffee during the day, but I found myself wide awake at 2 a.m. and my throat was dry as hell. I finally slid out from under the covers and slipped into my slippers, careful not to wake Maria sleeping next to me. I walked out of our bedroom to the kitchen, almost slipping on some spilled water on the floor. Muttering a curse, I turned on the kitchen light and poured myself a glass of water from the refrigerator. From where I stood, I could see right to our Christmas tree, and I saw that the mysterious present had been opened. And what I had almost slipped on, what I had first thought was spilled water, was revealed to be a trail of bright red blood leading from the open present towards the bedrooms. My body was frozen in shock for a few minutes, but I quickly snapped out of it. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife we had and I crept over to the hallway, careful not to make a sound. My heart was racing as I followed the trail of crimson back towards the bedrooms, and my blood froze when I realized that it was leading me into the boys' room. I stood outside the bedroom doorway for a moment, trying to build up my courage for whatever waited for me in the darkness. Then I sprang into action, running into the room and switching on the lights in one quick movement. I had tried to prepare myself, but what I saw made the knife slip out of my hand and my jaw drop in horror. My boys had twin beds, one on either side of the room. Micah, the oldest, was on the left side, and Jamie, who was a year younger, was on the right. I saw Micah first, sleeping soundly and wrapped in his sheets. But when I turned to Jamie, I almost threw up. His sheets had been thrown off the bed and he was sprawled out across his mattress in an unnaturally rigid pose. His limbs were bent back in ways that no bones should be able to move, and his unseeing eyes were open and stared up at the ceiling. Blood covered his pillow, his mattress, everything. I knew Jamie was dead without having to check, and I knew that I had to call the police. But I think I was going into shock, because all I could think of in the moment was to stagger into the living room to inspect the present. It was then that I saw that the box was logged through with blood, and the top of the box had been ripped off by the creature that was held inside. There was something in there that I couldn't make out, which the police later identified as a dismembered hand, most likely put there to feed the creature once the box had been sealed. Yet when I bent down to inspect the box, I saw a small scrap of white paper that was perfectly unstained by the blood. I picked it up with shaky hands, and I was barely able to make out the words written on it in impeccable cursive. More.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine. Stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
My brother died when I was a child. He kept talking. I think people should know what he said, by the Emperor's finest. And then finally the doctor shut the case, snuffed out the last wisps of hope. So we'd all set up camp in his musty room at the hospital. The walls were freckled and pea green, the only light slanted in from between the shutters, glaring bars stretching out across the floor to end just short of Dennis' bed. The staff managed to bring in another, simpler bed for me, and my parents slept in old wicker chairs. The third day was when it finally happened, when the steady beeping of the heart monitor started to break down into frantic electronic wails and Dennis began to shake feebly as a dry crackling sound rose up from his mouth. The doctors and nurses at the hospital had changed lately. They'd started treating Dennis differently. Before, the resuscitations were always these frantic, desperate efforts, like 100-meter sprints. There was a desperate desire to succeed in every single movement. Now it was different, more like a steady jog. These were people who were going through the motions, ticking off things they were meant to try from little checklists in their minds. I was just quietly staring at Dennis' face. We all stood there for a long time. I finally realized that this wasn't just one thing, this wasn't a single event. For the first time my mind started running away with itself and unfolding all the endless implications of this, every one of them causing my gut to sink and for me to miss him so much even though he'd just been here. I was never going to talk to him again, he was never going to laugh at me again, we were never eating dinner again, we were never going to school together again, we were never going to be in the same class in school again, or talk during classes at school again. It just kept going and going as I realized that this wasn't just one person I'd lost a million things, something that was meant to be this constant presence was gone and nothing would ever be as good as it should be again. Everything I was going to do be soured by the certainty that I wouldn't be doing it with him, or that I wouldn't be able to tell him about it later. It had only ever been a childish assumption that any of that would happen. My parents froze, still clasped against each other, my mother curled over and supported by my father. Harry. We're sorry, he's still dead. Look, it could have been gas escaping. They moved on to the defibrillator again, sending crashing waves of power down through Dennis' chest before listening with a stethoscope. After 10 minutes they all just stepped back. They'd run the checklist out, nothing had happened. One of the men, a doctor I think, answered. Nothing is happening. We try and pump in oxygen and it does nothing. There's no pulse, and we can't induce one for more than a second or two. The body temperature's down 3 degrees. He's deceased. Please Harry, where are you? I walked over to his side. I wasn't relieved he was talking, I was only afraid. This was wrong. I wanted to run, I wanted him to just be gone so I could cry with my parents and be done with it, but I kept walking and put my hand on his bony, cold and clearly dead hand. But it's like whatever's doing the thinking is somewhere else, still interacting with the stuff that does the talking. That's exactly right, came a voice behind us. I looked over my shoulder and saw an old man in a gray business suit. He had a well-trimmed silver beard and was all around a strange contrast to the clumsy chaos that had engulfed the hospital. Who are you? Said the technician. I'm Daniel Coans, he said, handing the technician a crisp business card. I'm with the Orpheus Institute. We're a semi-private medical research body and we've dealt with a few cases similar to this one. The hospital president has already agreed to let us look into this. He answered in a low, comfortable tone. Do you think he might come back? I know that even if he does it won't be for long, but I'd really like him back, for however long. I didn't say enough. I wasn't big enough to say the things we had to say to each other. If such a thing is possible, I swear we will do everything in our power to make it happen. We've prepared a private waiting room for you too. Coans gestured down to the turn in the hallway. There were 2 people in the white scrubs standing there. His hand tightened on my shoulder. None of that would have been possible without the people in Houston, without the men who talked to the astronauts, kept them focused, made sure we got the information we needed. Harry, we believe Dennis is in a very strange place that humanity would do well to learn about it. You are Houston, your brother is an astronaut. He pulled a laminated sheet out from under his lapel. I accepted the card, having given up on reaching a decent understanding of the situation. He ushered me into the operating theater and shut the door behind me. I was alone, the only sound an almost inaudible ringing that emanated from the mass of stainless steel racks and implements, and the cold sturdy operating table Dennis was lying on. Try to keep your loved one / the subject unaware of their deceased state. Past experience suggests that the shock may cause disconnection. Maintain constant conversation, as this has been shown to help maintain the connection. First step, ask your loved one / the subject to describe their experiences and/or surroundings. Encourage them to be as an ocean. I said. Can you see anything in the ocean? Dennis took in a phlegmy, pointless breath. Far away, the horizon, it gets dark. Dark hungry line where even clouds stop, where everything stops. Darkness is clawing, moving like it's alive, miles and miles of angry hungry dark. Can't go there, can't go that way. At this point I lost the thread of the exchange as perspective suddenly hit, all the things I didn't understand and the fact that whatever Dennis was, he wasn't alive. I broke, crying and wailing and digging my face into his bare, emaciated ribs, cold like meat straight out of the fridge. I kept squeezing his hand, harder and harder, pushing the stiff fingers closer together. Harry. Harry, are you crying? It's hard to tell. So much here already sounds like crying. His words struck me deep enough make my sobs catch in my throat, and I just started looking at him again, settling back to my previous catatonic distance from what was happening. I can't come back. No getting back. Like spilling something on the ground, no getting it all back inside and right again. It took a few seconds to force myself to accept this, but I carried on, hoping that maybe I could steer him toward some sign that he was wrong. What's in the other direction, away from the ocean? Dennis, tell me what's in the other direction. Just the sand. The gray sand, on and on. Not many bad things yet. Not many bad things to see yet. There'll be more when I get where I'm going. I'm going to start walking now, Harry. And he just kept talking. It's just not a talking kind of place. We were supposed to have done all our talking before we came here. Now we should just keep quiet. But my voice isn't here, my voice is all the way up there, with you. I guess that makes sense. So, what are all the people doing? It's just called the center of this place, maybe the center of everything. But what? I said, starting to lose control. Why do you have to go? Depends, a few days ago I passed this woman. He didn't. Dennis? Dennis? Dennis, come back, Dennis. A growl tore out of his mouth and his frame thrashed upwards, causing me to jump back and tumble down onto the floor, smashing into surgeons' cells and causing gleaming surgical instruments to rain down around me. I didn't have time to think before I'd forced myself up again and bent over the operating table to stare desperately into my brother's eyes. I took his hand again, squeezing it as hard as I could. What? It hasn't been a day. It gets worse closer to the center. There's so many people now, thousands, tens of thousands, and they're all walking to the center. But what's so terrible? I told you, the center. I'm getting close now. All the clouds with their screaming faces are curving, all curving and being pulled in the same direction, twisting their way into the center. Please just stop walking and come back. Oh God, what are the walkers? It's fine. They're bad, but you get a sense of perspective here. Sure, they're scary for you, but they're nothing next to the center. They're bottom feeders, moss that grew on the outskirts. If they're really like sea urchins, then the center must be like a shark, or a whale, or some huge thing right at the bottom of the sea that's too big to come up near the surface. You've never said things like this before. I don't know how to describe it. When you're here, stuff just breaks down a little and you don't always need to have learned a word to know it. This place is less obsessed with causes and 2 plus 2 equaling 4. Its job isn't to make sense. He went quiet again, and this time I wasn't sure I wanted to stop him drifting off. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear any more of this, but regardless of what I wanted, another groan soon creeped out of his mouth and he was back. It's inside this huge thing like a beehive, floating above the ground. It's gray too, gray and covered with streaks and ridges like it was used to be liquid and hardened, or it's like made of web or something. So big, hairy. I've never seen anything like it. All the clouds are swirling down into the hole at the top of it, still screaming. Hundreds of holes, messy ragged holes pitch black on the inside. It's bigger than cities, hairy, and everyone's heading towards it, thousands and thousands swarming under it, pushing against each other to climb the bridges, messy bridges from the ground right up to the holes, right into the pitch black. The center's in there, hairy. I'm here. Where else is there to go? I'm at one of the bridges. Please, you can come back. No. That'd be like going back into the womb. Can't be done. This is what's next. Oh. Oh God, I'm starting to feel something. I think the center's doing it. I'm getting bitter. Every mean, spiteful, everything angry thing in me, it's swelling, spreading out and smothering the rest of me. I'm so mad, Harry. I'm getting so much smaller and my hate is getting so much bigger. I'm sorry, I said, fully in tears. And then we went limp. His hand let go, his back sagged and he crashed to the floor. He'd broken 3 of my fingers, but shock was keeping it distant. I threw myself down onto my knees to see his face, slapping it and looking for any sign he was still there. He gasped again, fainter than ever now. It's hurting me, Harry, it's hurting me more than I've ever been hurt, and it hasn't even noticed me. Please, the man told me you need to describe it. He said if you kept talking you might stay. So big, he said, his voice wobbling and breaking like he was crying. Its fingers are bigger than skyscrapers, and it has so many fingers, millions, and ribs. The body is all ribs, or are they just fingers all folded up? I don't know, but there's so many and so big, Harry. And the masks, Jesus, the masks. The masks, its face is bigger than countries, all different. Some the eyes are perfect circles, others have huge pointy holes where the mouths should be. Some are blank and some have 8 eye holes, and some look like human faces, like perfect human faces with deep dark hollow eyes. All of them, the inside of all of them is so dark, a living dark, a pulsing dark, pulsing all together, and it's so huge, and you can feel it pressing in on you, filling the air with badness and crushing down on you, and from inside you can feel the bad in you reaching out to it like a baby reaching out for its mom. And Jesus Christ, Harry. Dennis, talk to me. What is it? What is it? It's not the devil. No, that's what I thought at first, but it's not. It's more like God. It's like if God hated everything. What is it? Please, don't ever die. He asked me if I'd had any visions or any strong sensations, if I thought Dennis was telling the truth, and if I could explain the ways in which Dennis was acting differently than he already was. I was detached and drowsy from exhaustion and trauma and pain from my hand, and just answered honestly. At the end, Coans made me memorize a phone number and sign a load of confidentiality forms, making it very clear that not a word of this could leave the hospital. I was to call if I started experiencing any phenomena I thought were related to my Dennis, and, finally, they left. The years flew by and the whole experience became something I just had to live with, some dreaded thing my thoughts would sometimes steer me back to, but mostly I managed to keep living, to accept it all as something I couldn't understand. The fact that Dennis was gone was always worse than the way he went, however terrifying and unnatural it was. But lately I've been having a dream. It started off vague and incomplete, but every few nights it repeated, getting longer and more vivid. I start to leave my body, surging forward down the pass, no longer myself, just a nameless, thoughtless observer, gliding like a ghost for lack of legs. He runs down the dark pass, on and into a sunless, barren country on the other side, a place where the soil is gray and dry. He runs for ages, but soon he stops and falls and curses me, screams about how much he hates me and how much I cost him by driving him into this place. He rages for a long time. Then a second person comes, sometimes a man, sometimes a woman, sometimes old, sometimes young. They say they too were driven past the mountains, or that they wandered past them by mistake and can't get back over. Dennis always says the same thing, then let's suffer together. Let's hurt together. And then there's a rumbling, a massive shifting sound. The countless bodies start to rearrange, forming deep canyons of flesh that make up a horrendous, rage-filled outline of a face. There's a shift greater than any earthquake. The pile moves, rolling forward, pulling itself with enormous appendages made of the miserable and the bitter and the despairing. It inches and tumbles on, crashing down and dragging itself onwards with overwhelming, apocalyptic sounds, and then I see that it's heading for the mountain range, it's heading back to the bright place with all its anger and hate and vengeances, and as much as it's made of millions and millions of people, I always know it's still one thing with one will, but all the hatreds of everyone buried in it, all the way back to the first one to curse, his rage still in there, rage directed at the first one to sin. It gets right up to the mountains. Then I wake up.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
Code Adam, by Thelibrarianchik. We already had 3 today and it was barely noon. Code Adam was the code word we used to alert us to a missing child. Often they were hiding in a clothes rack waiting for their mom to find them, or sometimes we'd find them in the bakery aisle happily munching on a box of sweets they'd opened and their parents would refuse to pay for. I rolled my eyes and mentally groaned. Honestly, how hard was it to keep track of a whole person? I know that kids are small and sometimes slippery, but they don't vanish into thin air. He's a 5-year-old boy, wearing jeans and a red hoodie. Blonde hair and green eyes. White sneakers, Caucasian, and his name is Hunter, Michael repeated to me with a sigh. We began walking the aisles, as did all my numerous coworkers. We checked the bakery aisle, the toy aisle, and checked the clothing racks as we waited to hear the all clear. But it didn't come. Usually we find the kid in under 5 minutes. Every once in a while it might take 10 minutes if the kid is really well hidden. Another 5 minutes passed and I was getting annoyed. The kid was either well hidden or he might have even waltzed out the front door in search of whatever had distracted his little goldfish brain. Do you think he got snatched? We should have found him by now, Michael asked, moving aside some stacks of paper towels. At this point we were checking behind everything in case the kid had gotten himself trapped in some tiny space. 30 minutes had passed before the cops came in the door. Someone had called them, whether it was the store or the kid's mom I wasn't sure. If my boss called them it meant the kid probably wasn't in the store. And that brought the fear of kidnapping. One of our supervisors found me and told me to go back to my regular stock shelving duties. Her name was Ashley and she was actually a pretty nice person and one of my favorite supervisors. There were tears in her eyes and I knew she was probably worried about the boy. She was 7 months pregnant with her first child, so this was probably her worst nightmare made reality. It's gonna be okay, Ashley. Maybe the kid just ran out the door and went to the park. The tapes will show what happened to him. I stammered, trying to reassure her. I was never good around crying women. Ashley smiled at me. Thanks, Roland. You're right, I'm sure it'll be okay. 2 more hours passed before the voice chimed over the intercom. Code Adam. This time it's a girl. Asian with a pink polka dot dress, black shoes, and her hair is in a ponytail. Her name is Daisy, he whispered to me, and he looked alarmed. When my shift was over, I practically ran to my car. The store was becoming too oppressive, and we all walked around with a rising sense of alarm. Having one child kidnapped was terrible. But 2 in one day was some kind of sadistic pattern. 2 more were taken today. Twin boys. No one saw anything. That was all the message said. My blood froze and I didn't bother replying. My customer service smile was pasted on my face all day as I answered question after question from increasingly angry people. Suddenly over the intercom the voice spoke again. Code Adam. We didn't find that kid either. It was another little girl. She was turning 8 this weekend and she and her mom were at the store picking up a birthday cake. Her picture was on the news that night and I was morbidly fascinated by it. She was a cute little girl, and it almost brought me to tears wondering what some pervert might be doing to her. It felt like a violation as well. Yeah, I might not have had the greatest love for my job, but it was still a place that I was tied to. I had friends who worked there, I knew almost every inch of the store, and the thought of some predator coming into that space and taking an innocent kid was terrifying to me. The next day I worked was utterly surreal. The store was basically deserted, for which I was thankful. If I had to describe the feeling there, it was almost post-apocalyptic. Everyone finished their jobs with a manic urgency. The customers who came in for groceries were, thankfully, all adults, and they seemed keen on getting what they wanted and getting out. An hour before my shift was scheduled to end, a group of men came into the store. Perhaps a dozen in all, wearing camo, and a few teen and preteen boys. It made my hair stand on end. They looked serious and they all spread around the store as if they were on the hunt. In the distance I suddenly heard some shouting. My blood ran cold thinking that someone had pulled out a gun. But then I heard the intercom come to life. I only learned about this secondhand. But the tapes that would normally show every square inch of the store never showed what happened to the kids. In every tape each kid seemed to disappear inexplicably into thin air. It was blamed on a weird glitch, though I'm not sure if anyone believed that. Conspiracy theories went crazy and a lot of the higher-up managers were threatened. People blamed human trafficking, alien abductions, and even portals to another dimension. Someone tried to burn the store down but they didn't succeed, and they never caught who did it. After that the corporate types decided that closing the store down permanently was the best course of action. I stayed there during the last days, and watched the store go down like some kind of dying animal. There was one last Code Adam. A 10-year-old had come into the store to buy cheap clothes with her parents during the liquidation sale and not been found. I suppose the fact that the store was packed with bargain hunters had lulled her parents into thinking she was safe. After that day they closed the store and shipped the inventory off to be sold elsewhere. I never set foot in the place again. Not that I wanted to. I think the parents of the kids who went missing sued the store, but I'm not sure what became of that.
And now, as the hour gets cold, and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously, this next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is HorrorSlop.
Why would you tell a 5-year-old kid such a fucked up tale? Ever since the memory of my 5th birthday came back to me, this is the question I've kept asking myself. But I don't have the answer. Grandma, will you tell me a story before bed? Partly it was the darkness of my bedroom. The shadows were so thick I could barely make out my stuffed toys, sitting in a row on top of my dresser, but mainly it was my new birthday present. The present Grandma had got me. It wasn't my main present, that was the pack of monsters in my pocket toys I'd ripped open downstairs. No. This was an extra present. A secret present. I hated it. Even in the dark, I could see its shadowy outline on my bedside table. The thing gave me the creeps. Grandma raised her eyebrows at me. Not too scary. I shook my head. She leaned over and switched my bedside light back on, then perched at the foot of my bed. Smiled down at me. Out of the corner of my eye I could still see Grandma's present. It was watching me from my bedside table. I did my best to ignore it. Okay, said Grandma, making herself comfortable. I think I'll tell you a story about a witch. One day in the early summer, the girl was coming home from school when she met a boy on the path. She'd never spoken to him before, but she recognized him well enough. He wore the same uniform she did, after all, and she guessed he must be in the year above her at school. "Where are you off to?" said the boy. His shirt was untucked, and he was smoking a cigarette. The girl hesitated. Her mother had told her cigarettes were bad. She'd also told her never to speak to strangers on her way home from school. But then again, thought the girl, was this boy actually a stranger? The headmaster at their school said they were all one big family. If this boy wore the same uniform as her, they couldn't really be strangers, could they? The boy finished his cigarette, then flicked it into the grass. He smiled at the girl. "Before you go home, don't you want to see something cool?" he asked. But just as she'd walked past him, he called out to her again. "It's a puppy," said the boy. "Our dog had a litter of puppies last week, and Dad said I could keep one. It's in this old barn near my house. Don't you want to see the puppy?" Now, the girl loved puppies. She'd wanted a dog for as long as she could remember, but her mother always said they couldn't afford one. Right then she'd have given anything in the world to pet a cute little puppy. When she closed her eyes, she could just picture it, a happy little dog with a big, pink tongue and a wagging tail. Eager to meet her. The girl paused, and looked down the path that led back to her house. She thought about her mother. Then she looked back at the boy, who was smiling at her. The girl only started to feel nervous when they were right outside the barn. When the girl finally got back home, the sun was setting over the ocean and the sea was the color of blood. It was her grandmother who found her like that. And in the hallway of their little cottage, the girl did. She told her grandmother about the boy, and the barn, and all the horrible things those bigger boys had done to her in the shadows. But right then, as her grandmother led her to an old wooden chair and sat her down, the girl hardly even noticed them. Her grandmother was speaking to her in a soothing voice, and all she could do was listen. She listened as her grandmother told her that there was a special trick she knew. A trick to protect against evil. A trick to protect her against those horrible boys, so that they'd never be able to hurt her again. So that she'd have control of them .. As grandmother pulled 3 dolls out of the box, she closed her own eyes. Began to whisper. The sound made the girl's skin itch, but it didn't last long. Soon her grandmother had lined the dolls up on the carpet, and her eyes were open again. The last thing she pulled from the box were a pair of black knitting needles and some yarn. "Those boys that hurt you, sweetheart," she whispered. "I want you to describe them to me." And although she was still terrified and although it made her feel sick, the girl did. She described the boys as well as she could remember. She described them as her grandmother went to work with her needles. And finally, with the blood-red sun disappearing below the sea outside the cottage window, the dolls were finished. The girl's grandmother took the girl by the hands, and looked into her eyes. "I want you to keep hold of these dolls, sweetheart," she whispered. "As long as you have possession of them, those boys will never be able to hurt you again." And do you know what? Those boys never did. The girl was sitting in an armchair overlooking the sea when her grandmother burst through the door of the cottage. As the girl turned from the window and smiled in greeting, the old woman held a newspaper out to the girl with shaking hands. "3 brothers tortured and killed in brutal mass slaying," read the headline. The girl smiled down at her work, and took her grandmother's shaking hands in her own. "They won't be hurting anyone now, will they?" she whispered. "You see, sweetheart," said Grandma, as she stood up from my bed and switched off the light. "I gave you one with a happy ending." "Grandma, wait," I said, my voice stopping her mid-turn. "Isn't your name Agatha?" But a few moments later, my eyes were pulled back to the gift on my bedside table.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness, I did it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon, and leave a comment telling us what story made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same dat time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.